So welcome everybody from both the Suncoast and the Central Florida Audiophile Societies. This is one of our first joint Zoom meetings, actually our second joint Zoom meeting, I think. We'll be discussing everything about streamers, DACs, and servers, everything for digital audio. And we're glad that everybody can get together and discuss this topic. There's some newbies, I think. I want to start off by a show of hands. You can just do this on screen. How many of you are currently streaming music through that type of a setup? Just raise your hand on camera. Okay. So Arthur is not. Anybody else that I missed who's not streaming yet? Okay, Lenny and Joe said yes. Okay, so to start off with, I think what we should do is go over the basics and answer questions for anybody who's just a neophyte or interested in starting this and what the various components are. And then we'll move on from there and try to share our experiences. A lot of us have been doing this for a while, have moved and grown with our system and components. So we'll share all of our perspectives. And Juan, you've got your hand up, so I'll let you go ahead and speak and unmute yourself.
Hey, just real quick, define streaming. Because some people are using like a laptop and using that to hear music on their computer. Is that considered streaming, or do you define streaming as using a dedicated streamer to stream? What's the definition of, or your definition of streaming?
I think a computer could be streaming as well. Any way you're digitally transporting music to your system from either the internet or your local repository or server, whether it be internet streams or music that you have converted to FLAC or WAV file or iTunes, any way that you're digitally delivering music, except for a CD player or physical media, to your system. If anybody else has another definition.
No, I think that covers it pretty good. I think as long as you're getting streaming music from the internet, directly from the internet, you're streaming, no matter how you do it.
Or from your local library. That's what I do. Probably half internet streaming and the other half is my local library that's been ripped to FLAC files. How many of you, by show of hands on screen, predominantly stream music? So about, yeah. Okay, versus any other physical media. So a lot of us are already doing that. I'll just go by basically the order that people have questions, and we'll answer them and discuss the basics. If you can use the raise hand icons, that'll keep it in chronologic order. I prefer that. I'm going to just look here to see if this is working for me on my screen. Bear with me just a moment. And I think maybe not. Arthur, you're up first here. And unmute yourself, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have any questions. Just add though that I use the Blue OS app, stream my music via my from the Node 2 to my integrated amp, and I think it sounds great for most music. Some music is better than others, of course, but I enjoy it very much.
So the Node 2, does it have a DAC built in? The Node 2?
I use a built-in DAC, yes.
Okay.
Very simple setup. And the Node 2 then goes RCA out to my integrated amp.
Do you have your Node 2 hardwired to your internet service, to your?
It is using an Ethernet cable, not the Wi-Fi.
It is using Ethernet cable. Okay.
Does it have software like built-in smartphone app, or how do you control it?
Yeah, there's a Blue OS app from my phone that I control it with, and I'm not super happy with that. The search functions are not so great, but I can usually find things that I like. And also there's a Spotify Connect, which works pretty well.
Do you subscribe to Qobuz or Tidal?
And I also use Qobuz, yes. Qobuz and Spotify mostly.
And how about your own music? Do you have any files on your computer that you also stream?
Well, I made a USB thumb drive with about a gigabyte of music, not a lot, which I plug directly in to the Blue OS, and I listen to that once in a while. But it's only 1 gigabyte, so it's about 30 albums, I think.
Mhm. All right.
Now,
Interesting.
do you know, Arthur, what operating system the Blue OS is? Is that proprietary to Blue Sound, or is it
Some kind of version of Linux.
is
Yeah,
it a
some
Linux
versions
operating
use
system?
proprietary. You can't get into it other than via the app.
No, I understand that. I just kind of wonder what's behind it. What's what's the base operating system?
Some sort of Linux, but I never looked at it directly.
Okay.
How would you say the quality of the music by that system streaming compares to playing hard media like CDs in your system or vinyl?
Well, it's hard to tell because the path is different. But when I find a really good recording, it sounds really, really good.
Mhm. Okay, so it's a basic setup. It's kind of an all-in-one, one-box solution, which is certainly one way to go.
Yes. Hmm.
Now, the fact that you put in added storage, because it's not really a server, right, Arthur?
No, it doesn't store music by itself. I added an extra thumb drive.
An external.
Mostly I'm streaming from ProBuzz and from Spotify for the most part.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. John?
Okay, I think maybe we should differentiate. Are we calling when you're playing a music file from a local hard drive? That would be that's your own server, right? So we're not
Right.
streaming at that point.
Yes,
Is
you
that
are.
right? That's how I think of
No,
it.
streaming is coming over the internet. I mean the Ethernet
Right.
cable is.
That's how I said it, because I know Alan was saying
Hmm.
the streaming. Yeah. So I think if it's a local file, it's more you're pulling it off your server on a hard
Server.
drive. Am I right? Okay. And then if you're streaming, then you're coming from Tidal or Qobuz or something like that, Spotify, whatever.
I would still call them similar because you have to have a DAC somewhere in the system. So even if you're pulling music off your own computer, if you're delivering it through Ethernet or Wi-Fi to your DAC.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difference. I'm definitely not. I have a optical cable that I'm going from a render to into my system, into my digital system. So I don't know if that. I mean, we're getting nitpicky here, but I don't know if that would be considered streaming. But anyways, just for info, I put a post on the sites, and my comment was that I feel that the local hard drive, which I have 2 solid state local big hard drives, to me sounds better than the Tidal most of the time. And I usually, if I don't have the song on my hard drive, because it usually sounds better, that's when I use the Tidal. Because that's the only one I have is Tidal. I don't have Qobuz and all that, but Tidal has a lot. Really, it's gotten really big. Because at first it was missing some songs, but now it's almost got everything.
Does it have all the resolutions, John?
Yes. Yeah, I play in 96K. I use 96. Yeah, that's the highest. Yes, but I can't. But you know what's funny, Joe, is a lot of times, like the high resolution music doesn't sound as good as some of these 44:1 resolution. I really think it's from where it starts. The recording starts from, rather than trying to do all these fancy things at the end. Because there's so many songs that I play 44:1 and it sounds just beautiful, entertaining, emotional, whatever. I don't think you have to be stuck on having a real high resolution file, is my opinion.
I agree fully.
Does Tidal do DSD as well?
They do the high resolution. What does Title do, AJ? I think they do the high resolution
PCM.
audio. PCM.
Yeah, yeah. None of them do DSD. You'd have to have a specialized service for DSD.
You know, I would say that, you know, your points are pretty good. I think, you know, I'm with Alan. I'd still call it streaming, whether you're coming off your local hard drive, you're coming off the internet. It's still streaming in that you're pulling things in via your internet connection.
Is a CD streaming?
Yeah, well, not really, right? Because you're playing
No?
a media that's rotating. It's like a disc rotating on a player, and you're not pulling data, you know, whereas your local hard drive is, you call it local streaming versus external, you know,
Okay,
internet
we can
streaming,
call it
right?
that.
But then when you talk about the high res thing, you know, sometimes it can be deceiving in that, like you said, it all depends on where it starts from. You know, if you start with a recording that was done that way, high res from the start, that may have a chance of sounding better. But if you take a regular CD and you rip it and then you know, you, like you said, you put magic into it and you double res it or whatever, you make it, you know, gazillion kilobits per second or whatever, but it started out 44K. So you can't get there from here, right? You're not going to get something out of nothing. So sometimes they do that. They sell it to you as high res when it really was just up, you know, they just duplicated or whatever the resolution, but it is really the same content as a regular CD. So it's not going to sound any better.
Well,
They what they did is they increased their profits, not the resolution.
Yes.
you see, to me, whether you're reading it off of a hard drive or a solid state drive or an optical disc, it's the same stream. It's the same digital.
I agree. That's
stream.
what I was asking.
So to me, it doesn't matter.
We can call it a stream. I mean, it's not analog, but we could still call a CD a stream. Almost.
Absolutely.
How about if we said if it involves using your network, it be via Ethernet or Wi-Fi,
That I
It's a
agree.
stream.
then it's
I
a
like
stream.
that. I like
Then I
that
agree.
definition, Alan. Yeah. Because that's really the difference.
And therefore, then if you use your hard drive, you know, all these fancy network these network wires and stuff, $6,000 for some of these things, for certain what routers or modem.
Yeah,
it's
it's
just
a rip-off.
crazy what they got
Absolutely.
going now. So I'm not even going to get into that part of it.
You should not need to. I hope we have, maybe not, if not today, sometime we can speak to that, because there's a lot of rip-off going on that. But, you know, also, like you mentioned, you know, the difference between pulling files from your local drive versus pulling it from a service. And, you know, I would say that sometimes, you know, pulling from the service may not sound as good from your drive, because you're dealing with your ISP, and there's something called like network jitter. So,
Right.
you know, depending on how those packets arrive and what latencies and issues there may be between where it started to get to you, right? That could have an effect on the end result. Whereas if it's your local network and your local drive, you don't have the bottleneck of the outside world. So
Right.
you're not going to have those front end issues. Not to say that that's always the case, right? Because you know, as you know, you could be on the internet and you can do a speed test and you could be at 400 megabits per second right now, and 10 seconds later you could be much lower, depending how many people hopped on. So it depends, right? You may one day may sound better than others from you pulling things from the internet, because the internet is such a, you know, crapshoot. You can't tell what's going to happen as the packets arrive to your box.
One thing I did like about it when we were doing the show hotel and the show at the hotel room, I was all local music and people couldn't get the music in, and I'm like, my room was rocking, but other people, it was just like, you know, the networks were, you know,
Terrible. Yeah,
were
it can happen.
terrible.
Right. And you
You
pay
know,
that
so
price.
that was one positive thing about it.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, AJ, you've been patiently waiting with your hand up. We'll let you chime in.
Streaming is actually defined as accessing files from the internet, so it's not local. That's what streaming is, and that's why Amazon and Tidal and all that sort of thing are called streaming services. So streaming is actually defined as pulling files from the internet. Your playback on a local network or whatever you're talking about is not streaming technically, but
beg
you
to
may
differ.
refer to it. What's that? Google it. No, Google it. Look it up.
I'll beg to differ. Maybe I'll go and that's probably in a wiki page or something. But yeah.
Well, you can Google it, but that's what streaming is defined as. So I can't access your hard drive. I can't access anything on your network.
That's true. That's true.
So whereas with a internet service,
You can.
anyone here can exactly, and so that's
Yeah.
what streaming is defined as.
Yeah.
Now, good,
Like,
bad, ugly, that's a whole another story. In terms of sound quality and all that kind of stuff, there's no evidence to say that streaming locally and streaming from internet service is any different. However, some services do proprietary processing and mastering and all that sort of thing of files, where it's actually you can analyze the file, and it's a different file. So you may hear a difference there and say, oh, it's the streaming versus my my hard, or my local network, but it's not really. It's the file itself has changed. So if you streamed the exact file that you play back at your home, you wouldn't be able to hear a difference unless there's some kind of problem with your internet connection, etc.
right.
But the fact remains that these streaming services do doctor stuff. You remember the infamous MQA that Tidal became known for, and that's why I dropped them for a while. And then of course they finally came around, and MQA went into the dustbin where it should belong, and I rejoined them. But MQA files were essentially doctored files of original recording and music and stuff like that. MQA was just a scheme to just doctor it up so where it may sound a little bit different if you played it back, but as any scheme like that, any scam like that, it didn't last. So anyway, back to the original program.
Okay. Gary, your hand is up.
Yes. Can you always download the music that you selected from the streaming service and keep it as your own and build that collection on your hard drive?
In some cases, you can. For instance, Qobuz, I believe, allows you to basically purchase. Well, actually, I think they allow you at the pro level. You can download. I think you can cache it. I don't know if you have to pay extra.
That's not streaming. Streaming is what I said. Access. A download is a separate thing. Some services may also, like Amazon, has a download service, but it's not the same as the streaming service. So it's two separate things. Can you download a lot of those files that you can stream? Yes, but you pay for those downloads separately, whereas a streaming service is typically a subscription, monthly, yearly, whatever, which would not include downloads unless it's some kind of package.
Well, real quick, I personally, I agree with you on that, AJ, but I think we should also allow the conversation to go into the, you have a NAS set up or you have hard drives where you're streaming locally, because realistically, your setup to stream from the internet or from your own hard drives locally is going to effectively be the same thing, right? You're going to still have a DAC, you're still going to have amps, you're still going to have preamp, you're still going to have a lot of that same equipment. So outside of like discussing specifics for streaming services or, spinning Rust versus SSDs with DRAM cache or not, I think that the discussion could be more of what type of hardware are you running, whether you're, like I use a Raspberry Pi because it works freaking amazing. I don't need to have something crazy expensive or crazy, more than what I need. It's perfect for my needs, but others might. I can stream locally on that. I can stream from the internet right to that. It doesn't matter. It's a computer. So for me, I think they're kind of one and the same, or same, but a little bit different.
You see that
You're serving, if you inject the server capability, the music is being served from something. It could be served from an internet stream. It could be served from your local library, network attached storage or hard drive on a computer or a USB stick or something. So maybe we just lump it together as you're serving music and streaming it through your network. I don't think we have to worry about semantics so much as what is the equipment. I agree, Grant. Let's focus on what you need for the specific use for each
Here, here.
case.
Well, it's digital playback. I mean, I wasn't saying we shouldn't discuss it. I was just
Right,
saying that
right.
there is a definition for streaming. I didn't say we can't discuss the other options. It's just all
See-
digital playback of files.
You see,
Yeah.
Alan, why this is semantics, and I agree with you. It is semantics. I think this is the whole confusing part of the whole digital landscape as far as it's changing to us as audiophiles. They're creating these pieces of hardware, okay, and they're calling them servers, they're calling them streamers, they're calling them DACs, they're calling them integrated amplifiers, they're calling them something different. So when we go out to purchase something, we're saying, well, why am I purchasing this? Why is this needed? Why is this called the server and this called the streamer? You know, so I think yes, it is semantics, but it's not like going out there and buying a power amplifier or a preamplifier. I mean, this is starting to get who wants to chop down this, you know, and partition these components to how they want to partition them.
I used to teach
Yeah.
the computers, and we used to say we're either going to play a local file or we're going to play a remote file.
Mhm.
That you're getting, it's either local or remote. I mean, it's different. You know, you're getting from different places. However you call it, streaming, whatever. It's a local versus remote file.
And the
Mhm.
same thing, right? In the end, you're whatever, you're pulling in a file, right? Because I have a
Right.
streamer, and the streamer can pull files from my local NAS, or it can pull it from the internet, but I'm using the same streamer,
Mhm.
right? So I
Likewise,
think
Gary,
My
you were
question.
still have your hand up. Go ahead, Gary.
The point of my question was, I have, I don't know if I'd say hundreds or thousands of CDs and everything, and there's a lot more than that in the world. And how in the hell, it would drive me mad if I had to know in advance what I want to listen to tonight, because I don't know what all is available. So I'd rather do it with CDs and DVDs than try to think up what I want to hear. And then who played that? When was that? How? What's her? Who? It would drive me nuts.
Well, that's a
I'd
whole
rather that.
another can of worms because you can build playlists. You can build playlists from like Tidal, Koba, Spotify. You can create a playlist. Sometimes they'll create one for you.
Yeah, no,
You
you
can
see stuff
also
that's available. You see stuff reviewed or stuff that's available, and so you're cued to go look for that. But still, I don't know. I see something that I would like, and then I buy it, and instead of looking for it on Spotify or some stupid thing.
let me before I get to Tony, I see your hands up. It's interesting. I've been playing with this for a long time. I actually uploaded a file on the group's IO of an article I penned 15 years ago or longer when I joined the Tampa Bay Listening Society at the time about how I got started with a squeeze box, the original squeeze box. I think Tony, did you respond to that as well? Was that you? I think about the squeeze boxes. I think so.
Yeah, I actually owned the very first one, the Slim P3, the Slim P3, which
Right.
was spelled SIL capital M capital P3.
Yeah.
That was the very first one in 1998 or 99.
Yeah. I got the second version, the first version of the squeeze box. I still have 6 squeeze boxes, but interestingly enough, and I have probably about 3,000 CDs. I've ripped about half of them to FLAC files that I have on my network attached storage, also on my laptop that I'm using today. So one serves as a backup to the other. But I use currently for my main system, just a $300, that was the original retail price, Squeezebox Touch, which is my streamer server, call it whatever you want, running. It used to be called initially Squeezebox Server Software. Then when Logitech bought them, they changed it to Logitech Music Server. And they actually maintained that for many years up until recently, where Logitech threw it back to the open source community and said, here, you guys take control of this system, no charge. It was open source to begin with. And now they're calling it Lyrion Music Server, the guys that are maintaining it. And it works the same as Logitech Music Server. And that's what I use to pull music from the internet. I have Qobuz. I can use that. My Squeezebox will connect to the internet and play from Qobuz. It'll connect to my local music library and send that to my DAC. I also have been listening a lot lately to a specific internet radio station called Radio Paradise, which is superb, very high quality. I think it's a lot of it is really CD quality, not all of it, but a lot of it. And they have now they have I think 4 different streams. It's a superb service called Radio Paradise. I'd encourage you all to check it out. I listen to the mellow mix. They also have a standard mix and a rock mix and a world mix, and they have a new one that's futuristic. I would encourage you to check it out. But the interesting thing with me, I right now just recently implemented a mesh wireless network in my home. Everything previously was all connected by Ethernet. And because my office Cat5 connection died, the jack went bad. I can't access it. It's behind my desk. I've been streaming everything wirelessly. And I don't see any difference in quality versus Ethernet versus just streaming it wirelessly through the mesh network, which is very interesting. I was quite surprised by that. So it can be done cheaply, $300 server streamer, whatever you want to call it. I do have an old 10-year-old DAC and a Bel Canto DAC that I use. Is very outdated, but it's good enough for my needs. You don't have to spend a lot of money. And as what's his name? I'm losing my mind here. Grant said he's just using a Raspberry Pi device, which you can build for probably $100 or less. So, Tony, I'll turn it over to you, but that was my 2 cents worth on how I do it.
Thanks. I just wanted to kind of sort of chime in with regard to what Gary was touching on and I understand the frustration with the online music services. There's so much music out there, and for those of us who are, maybe this pertains more to people who listen to classical music. I don't know, or maybe not. But the metadata is so poorly managed on most of these services that if you want to find a particular performance by a particular conductor or with a particular soloist, it maybe, I think Rune has the best management of metadata, but it's, to Gary's point, it can get very frustrating, especially when there are hundreds of different performances of something and you want to listen to a particular one. Sometimes it's just easier to go to your CDs and just grab it and play it. Sometimes it's just easier to do it that way. I mean, it's just the management, in my mind, for the online services, the management of the metadata is really poor. And a lot of times, like Tidal versus Qobuz versus whatever service like Amazon, you don't even know for popular music which particular recording you're listening to. And there's no way to find out. So it gets very frustrating.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I think Apple just recently purchased or acquired another company that specialized in classical music and has a unique way of tagging and using metadata that supposedly they're going to incorporate, I guess, with Apple Music or iTunes for better selection.
Yeah, I'm actually quite curious to see how that turns out.
Yeah, I'm curious. Is anybody, by show of hands, using iTunes or Apple as their main source? I guess not. By the way, asking Gary, you were asking about downloading music. I just launched Qobuz on my phone because I have the app and I subscribe to it. And as we speak, it's downloading a classical music album. So it gives you the option of downloading for playback. And I don't know if it limits how many you can have. I didn't purchase it, but I can basically, if I'm not connected to the internet, if I'm out running or riding and I don't have internet connectivity, I can still download some music to listen to on Qobuz locally on my smartphone. So there are services that do allow that.
Yeah, that's true. And then when you stop paying Qobuz, it disappears.
Yeah, probably.
Yes.
I'm happy with Qobuz thus far.
Disappears? Stuff that you
well, any of
download,
them, if you
basically?
cancel the subscription, you don't own the music. You're renting it from the service. And if you don't keep paying, you lose the content. That's one of the drawbacks to signing up and building an extensive playlist, is that you're locked in, and they know that. Yes, Tony. You're muted.
You're muted, Tony.
Yes, I agree with you. But however, there, and Joe, I think, has done this as well. You can actually purchase material off of Qobuz, and once you do, you own it. You have to pay to purchase, but they do offer that service.
Mhm.
And you can purchase it at any resolution you want. Usually they tell you what resolution do you want to purchase it at. Okay. But I do have a general question. Tony mentioned Rune. Okay. But Rune is really, when I see streamers that are Rune ready, that's really a separate software that manages metadata and manages your library. Okay, whether it is streaming from the internet library or local library, it does manage your library. Okay, I use Audiovana because I need some kind of software on my machine. Now, when you buy a streamer, it has a built-in software on top of some operating system, some open code. So it actually, there is some software there. It's just that you don't have control of saying which one do you pick. Okay. So when you use Rune, Tony, is that also a service? Is that also a streaming service as well?
So, short answer, yes. Long answer, Rune allows for the ability, for example, to run Qobuz via Rune. So you can access your Qobuz streaming service through Rune. But when you do that, you get what Rune offers beyond the. I'll say Rune probably has the best current management of metadata, but what it also has is it looks at what it is you're playing, what you like listening to on Rune, and then it has a very, very smart algorithm at making suggestions as to, what other things to listen to that you might actually be interested in. Whoever developed that algorithm was pretty bright. It's reasonably effective. The only thing I don't like about Rune is I kick myself because I should have bought the lifetime subscription when it was $450. Now it's like $1,000, and you know what? I'm not going to do it.
And how much is it per year? Like $120 a year?
Yeah, something like that. You wind up getting screwed one way or the other.
Can I add something here? Just for the Rune conversation, is that it's really kind of a front end and back end scenario, right? Where you have something they call the Rune server, right? So you got to have a back end kernel that provides the beef, if you will, the nucleus, as they call it too. So then you have to pay for that server, right? That Rune server, and you either pay for it monthly. As you mentioned, you buy the lifetime subscription. Luckily enough for me, I bought it when I think it was $5.99.
No, good for you.
Yeah. So I'm in, right, and I like Rune for the same reasons you mentioned. That it seems to be the most friendly way of parsing out what's going on out there with the music, what's available, even my own local library, right? So I do like it, but then you got to have a front end. That's what you see where the streamers are either Rune certified or not, and they become the front end, the endpoint, if you will. So you got to have a back end server, which you pay for, and then you get the front end app that runs on your phone. The server can run on a NAS, or it can run on a dedicated PC, or there are different flavors of what you can do with that. And then the
Yeah.
front end, you can have it on your mobile device. You can put it, it can be on a, a streamer that you buy, like a one box streamer that has room certified, and that becomes your endpoint. So many flavors of that as well.
But if I install Room on my MacBook Pro, it must have a front end.
Yeah, you
right?
got to have an app which runs on your phone or whatever, or your streamer, and then you got to have the Mac itself is really running Room server. And
But
then
if I buy Room for Mac for Mac,
you mean the server?
right? If I buy that,
Yeah, you buy the
Mac,
lifetime or you pay the monthly.
whatever I buy,
Yeah,
it has to have a front end because my
Yeah.
my machine needs some kind of front end.
that's right.
I understand with a streamer, you don't have that choice to pick what the front end is because it's built into the server. Okay.
No. There are streamers, like for instance, having areas from Auralic, for instance,
Yeah.
and it can run its own stack or it can run Room. So it can look
Right.
and act like a Room front end, like an endpoint. So it
Okay.
is an endpoint or it can be its own thing. So either way, right? So you got to have a front end and a back end. The back end is what you're paying the money for.
So typically you'll find to your point, those devices that will allow you to run Room, to service them are typically designated as Room ready. If you see Room ready, then you know that when you're running your Room front end, it'll just see it. It's their version of UPnP/DLNA, where back in the old day, and Alan knows this with regard to the squeeze boxes. Any front end that was UPnP DLNA compliant, you could use to run a squeeze box. You could use Bubble UPnP or JPlay, or there's like a zillion of them out there. But what Room did was they formalized it so that if the hardware is certified as Room ready, then a Room server, a Room front end, it'll just see it.
So there's no interpretation there. There's no intermediate. It just shows you the naked Room.
And Room will access it. Room will access it directly, and will essentially ignore whatever the hardware providers own kind of lightweight front end it has.
Right.
Yeah. So through the Room front end, right, you can then customize it to say, okay, my music is going to come from Amazon, or it's going to come from Tidal, or it's going to come from Cobus, or it's going to come from my local network, my local hard drive. So you can point to the sources that you want, and then you can go ahead and subscribe to, to log into Cobus within the Room app, your front end app, and that way when you log into the app, right, you can dial up what streaming servers you want music from, or your local hard drive if you want it from there, and then then you can select where you want it to go. So you can also have multiple DACs that are so you can send music. Like I have a Logitech Touch, like it was mentioned earlier. I have a Touch and I have an Areas, and I can decide which of the front ends which of the DACs I want to send the music to. So I can select where it comes from and where it goes.
Right.
The app gives me that freedom.
Yeah. In my opinion, I don't use Roon because it's so confusing and expensive. I think they've ruined the streaming.
You just don't want to spend the money. It's
That's
expensive
part of it.
now.
But
Yeah.
so many things that you purchase is Roon ready, or it's going to be Roon ready. And they have to license it to make it Roon ready, and then the manufacturers have to pay. I think it's a money grab, and these lifetime subscriptions are not your lifetime. It's going to be the lifetime of Roon.
It's
So
an
we'll
audio.
see how
It's
long
an
it
audiophile.
lasts.
It's an audiophile thing, Alan. You can't
Yeah.
try to understand it.
It has some benefits, but something as simple as currently now Lyrian Music Server or Logitech Music Server has another, and there's a ton of add-ons that other open source developers have created, which is phenomenal. And one of them is called like Keep the Music Playing. And what it will do is when your whatever album or albums or playlist you selected runs out, it'll continue to pull from your music library similar genres of music automatically and keep playing. It'll just
Rune does
some
that.
algorithm. I know Rune does that and is probably
Yeah.
much better at it, but I
Yeah.
do it for free with, and the beauty of something, one thing I will add that I think is a phenomenal advantage to digital streaming or serving, whatever you want to call it, particularly from your own library. Like I said, I've probably ripped about 1,500, half of my CDs, and I can put with the Squeezebox controller, I can have random play. I can randomly play all the music on my server, on my ripped NAS files, or I can pick a genre and it'll just randomly play what I own through that. And there's music. How many of us have CDs and music, whatever, that we never listened to? We forgot about it, but we've copied it. And this will just pop up randomly music. I'll have it playing in the background, and it's amazing stuff that I haven't
Yeah.
heard in 15 years will just pop up.
Fubar does that for free.
Well, yeah, well, this is free also,
Right.
but the
But I mean,
ability to do that.
everything that like he was talking about, Rune is selecting what you may. Amazon does that. All the services do that. So why on earth would I pay someone to access my own music?
Well, some of
That's
the thing that Rune
again,
offers, that actually the Lyrian music server offers as well, and Qobuz does, is while you're listening to the music, if you're controlling it from your smartphone, at least in my case, I can, on Qobuz and elsewhere, I can then read up on a biography of the artist if it's somebody I'm not familiar with and I'm streaming, see their discography, and maybe even have a link to their website, so I can kind of read up on music on an artist I'm not familiar with, which is a nice feature, especially when you can access it from a smartphone while listening. And that's something I think Rune is particularly good at that. It'll show you the album art in a large screen. It'll show you other stuff. I don't use Rune. Maybe Tony and those of you that use it can add, add
It's
more.
it's very effective, but I think I agree that the pricing has just, it's if you got in early, then thank your lucky stars.
well, I've heard horror stories of people being banned from Rune, that they did some kind of just inconsequential thing, and Rune locked their account and all that. You guys haven't seen anything like that?
No.
I don't know how that
I've
would.
seen a bunch of horror stories like that about Rune, that I forgot what they did, and they got locked out of their, so now they can't access their own music through through Rune or whatever. Again, different strokes for different folks, but I use a laptop. That's my entire thing. And I can access any music that exists on the internet. I don't care what service it is. It's some obscure service that is not going to be found on any hardware type server or type streamer, that sort of thing. And to me, it makes the most sense not to be locked into anything, or a new service comes along. I read all the time on Mike Bouvier's forum, with like Orander and those. What's the other one? The fancy one. There's Orander, and what's the other one? Lumen. Lumen. Right.
Lumen.
I mean, these are multi-$1,000 things, and people are going, well, what about Amazon Music? Oh, well, we're not going to be able to.
But Rune is not a streaming service, right?
No, I know. I switched gears from Rune now.
Okay.
I was talking about having.
You're done bashing Rune.
But for something to be Rune ready, aren't you talking about hardware?
Yes.
Thank you. So the hardware portion of it, which is again like Lumen, I think those are the kind of things that are Rune ready and everything else ready, but they're not ready for anything actually. You can't stream Amazon, and I think there's a new service that's going to be like a multi-channel thing. I caught wind of it on Audio Nirvana or something like that. That there's a new like a Atmos multi-channel service that they're coming up with. Well, now you're going to have to wait for Rune, and you're going to have to wait for Lumen, if it ever happens. If that ever happens, why on God's green earth would I do that when I'm on a $100 laptop? I can stream anything from anywhere on earth. And when I say stream it, I take the bits off the internet and I wirelessly send it to my system, which the DAC is over there in the system. So I take it from the laptop and wirelessly send it to the system, but I'm just pulling whatever streaming service or music it is that I'm accessing. It could be the BBC for that matter. How are you going to get that on a Lumen or I don't know if Lumen can do all that stuff, but I think you get my point. It
Yeah,
can.
but beyond the streaming service, there's also your local hard drive, right? Which I think there's a lot of value there. I mean, I've ripped all of my CDs. I haven't gone to a CD in ages, right? And I also ripped my Super Audio CDs. I found a way to do that.
Wait, how'd you
with
do
a
that?
with a Blu-ray player.
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
it's an old Sony Blu-ray player that can read the Super Audio CD, and I can make DSD files. And so
All PlayStations were able to do that.
Exactly, that's
Yeah.
right. So I've
Mhm.
got all my Super Audio CDs on my local NAS, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of value in being able to do that. You don't have to subscribe to a streaming service if you have a pretty decent library yourself.
How many CDs have you ripped?
All of them.
How many is that roughly?
Hundreds. Geez, I
Okay.
don't know, 300-400. I don't think
Okay.
I don't have thousands.
I was using J River for a while on the computer. I agree with AJ. You can do anything with that, but I can tell you the Arrender, it's called Conductor. The software is called Conductor. It's just really good, and you can play title through it, Qobuz, and you can get so much music out of it. And the thing I like about it is you can use it on your iPad or your phone. I mean, I don't want to bring my laptop up there and it'd be clicking. I like to use my iPad, and it's just better. I mean, I can go back and use J River anytime I want. I have my computer.
There's touchscreen laptops. There's touchscreen laptops.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is it depends what the user wants. What kind of convenience, I think.
That's right. We have options, right?
Yeah, that's why.
By the way, Lenny texted me. Oh, he's connecting now. He had a power failure and he lost his internet, but he's trying to reconnect now. I'm curious, Gary, I think, didn't you get the WIM? Maybe it wasn't the WIM Pro, but the WIM, he's back. The WIM Mini or something. Didn't you get one of the WIM devices?
WIM Pro.
Yeah. And what's your experience been with that? Is anybody else using one of those inexpensive streamers that have a built-in cheap DAC as well? Are you using that, Gary?
I just go optical into my receiver from the WIM.
And what's your experience with that as a device?
I play from the J River server on my big computer. Actually, I'm a little confused about all this. So what is the Render, John? Is that a streaming service or what?
It's a computer. It's a box.
It's a component.
Computer.
It's a component, like a Lumen.
Very quiet box too. I mean, it's grounded. It's a beautiful computer. I mean, it would cost you a lot to build this computer. I mean, I have a really good computer that we built by hand. This thing is just better. It's all isolated because I opened it up. It's a nice piece of equipment. But so the Arrender is a box. It's a computer, and it has its own software. And this software will search local drives. It'll search title. It'll search Qobuz, and it'll create a playlist. So you can have playlists of all different, whether it's a local file you're playing, whether it's a remote file you're playing. You don't even realize it. It seems like everything is on your computer. It's pretty cool.
How do you get?
Does it have storage? It has also storage or not? Do you have to have a separate storage?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're talking 16 gigs. I mean 16 terabytes. I'm sorry, 16 terabytes. I have a lot of music, and
how do you
so
get that music into your system?
I ripped it. I ripped most of it. I ripped it with EAC. I ripped the CD and then to a FLAC. I usually go to FLAC. I don't go. That FLAC's good enough. 96K is fine.
Anybody else using Render or Lumen or any of those all in one?
Render. It's a wonderful piece, and the software we're talking about, Commander, it also plays the Radio Paradiso and other radio stations and stuff, and it's just so easy to use and to search and find and play. It's a real joy.
And it has a built-in DAC?
Mine does. Most Renders don't, but mine does.
Mine does.
I was I was
rate the DAC as pretty average, so. But one thing I do is I send the digital file from my CD player to make it's actually then just a transport, but I send it to the Oranger's DAC, and it sounds much nicer than playing it through the CD player. So, and recently they dropped their prices. Tidal, did you notice that? The $12.99, which is pretty cool. Who drops prices these days? So.
Yeah, they're competing with Amazon and Spotify. By the way, anybody using Spotify as their primary streaming source, it's lossy as far as I know. I don't think it's as high quality as Tidal, Qobuz, and some others. I don't know about Amazon.
It's not, but I use it in my office, and the cool part about it is very, very convenient. I could play a music file at my office right now if I want to. Like it sees my office, it sees my outside pool area, it sees all these different areas. So it's more of convenience, and it's loaded with music files, like stuff that I think it has more. I think you find more music files on Spotify than anywhere else, as far as picking what you want. It's very good. Doesn't sound as good as Tidal, no, but for the pool area, and for my office, it's perfect.
One of the reasons I haven't changed, I think I posted this in our new discussion forum with the Squeezebox ecosystem, is I have 6 or 7 of them around the house in every room, basically, and I can stream whole house audio synchronized. If I'm having a party or if I'm moving from room to room, I'll put on 2 or 3 at the same time, and it's using all one source with the now called Lyrion Music Server, synchronizing it and sending it to all the different boxes, squeeze boxes, which I then have connected to active speakers or a little cheap system like in our master bedroom. So oftentimes I'll be able to listen anywhere, and I don't want to give that up. I want all the other squeeze boxes to work, even on my lanai outdoors. I have one in the garage. I'm working in the garage. I have music, and it's all coming from, basically my server. I can play my own music or stream from Qobuz or Radio Paradise or whatever. So that's an advantage of having an inexpensive system that allows whole house audio if you have multiple rooms you want to feed the music to. If you have an Orrender or Lumen or something else for your main listening system, I guess if that's all you need, that's great. But you might want to consider other options if you want to have whole house audio. Sam, I haven't heard anything from you as yet. Do you stream, or what's your setup, Sam Storch?
Well, I do stream, and I both from the internet and from my local network attached storage, where I rip all my CDs. I mean, we're 1,000 to 1,500 of them, and but still, I'm an old-fashioned guy. When I want to listen to the best quality, I put on a piece of vinyl. Yeah, but I probably listen half the time. I listen to the digital because it's so convenient. And it sounds damn good.
Did you all see, those of you who have already signed up at Groups.io, that Jim Hannon, I think that's his name, one of our club members, used to sell, buy and sell vinyl, and he's selling his whole collection now for anybody in the club who wants to buy pieces of it, pick and choose, because he's gone to all digital.
I bought some records from him today.
Oh, good.
Gary gave his out for free. I like that better.
Yes. That's true. Yes, Juan, your hand is up.
Hey, talking about the advantages and disadvantage, I'm talking about some other ancillary advantages of streaming is discovering new music. Sometimes you're just looking for an artist and it says artist similar to that, and or you're just searching. You search, put 3 characters and a whole bunch of artists come up, and it piques your curiosity, and you just. And just yesterday I was listening to something, and I discovered a new artist, and I loved her, and I shared it with Joe. I said, Joe, listen to this artist, man. I think it's something you would like. And the advantages too is sometimes they have like a history of the artist or the roots of the artist, like the background, which is quite interesting. So I find that a little ancillary benefits that you get from using a streamer. I'm using a Blue Sound Volt 2i, and it's been magical, the stuff that I've been able to discover using that device.
Very good point.
And it
When
just
does
so happened I was listening to music at the same time he sent me that recommendation, and I was able to listen to it. I just looked it up on Qobuz. There it was, and I just pressed the button and I listened to it, and so must have been listening to music at the same time. And then I said, well, that's good, but listen to this. And then, he came back to me, well, that's good, but listen to this. So,
You can create shared playlists too, I believe, on
know.
Qobuz and Tidal, which is interesting. We could, I suppose, maybe even have a Suncoast Audiophile Society, or you can have a Central Florida Audiophile Society shared playlist, which is
That's true.
interesting.
That would be.
The other thing I
you're
discovered
hosting
too
you're
is they
hosting
have
that on your NAS, Helen, or how would that work?
You'd have to use the app, but you can create a public or a private playlist. All it is basically everybody would have to have access to Qobuz or
Okay,
Tidal.
Qobuz, that's where it's coming from. I was thinking that maybe if we had a NAS someplace that we could all dump content into, we could all share from it.
Right. Well, the problem with that, I've had that idea. We could share excerpts, but because of copyright issues, having something hosted online, the full music would be problematic. I've looked into that, but you can have short excerpts. One of the other advantages of having the streamer, certainly Qobuz or Tidal, that when I'm reading a review, I don't subscribe to the Absolute Sound anymore, but I do Stereophile and others. Now I read a lot online, and they reference a certain track or album that they're using to describe what they're hearing and listening for this, that, or the other. I'll pull it up on Qobuz and listen in my system while I'm reading the review, and that's interesting. I actually suggested a while years ago to Michael Fremer, when he was still at Stereophile, that they do that and create a playlist for every month's publication of all the music that the reviewers used, and he poo-pooed it. They didn't want to put the time into that. But that's something else that I enjoy doing when they're talking about, oh, I can hear such and such, and I listen to my system. Is that what I'm hearing? Sometimes yes, sometimes not. And that ties into what we had last time at Gary's and AJ's demo in terms of soundstage and depth. You're reading what the reviewer says he's hearing, and it's an interesting comparison to our own systems and limitations.
Wouldn't it be cool if something like that would be done at audio shows, for example? Like, they would have playlists. And here's the audio show XYZ playlist. All the different contributors. Here's their playlist. And
some manufacturers will publish that on a website or a blog for a show occasionally, but not. I haven't seen much of that. Yeah. But like on Qobuz, I know looking at Qobuz, they have various manufacturers that have put together playlists. Like they have the Acora playlist on Qobuz, which I think is a great collection. And I think even Suncoast Audio, Mike Bovair's, I think they have a playlist, a public playlist on Qobuz. And there's hundreds of others there.
Speaking of playlists, that's another advantage of like Qobuz. They have these preset playlists that you can jump on. And I discovered one that was that's been called Official Audiophile High-End Playlist, and it has like 235 high-end tracks. It's been magical discovering new music on those predetermined pre-canned playlists.
That's on Qobuz or Tidal? You're muted. Sorry, Juan.
Qobuz.
So we could look for that. I could share the link and post. We all could post. There's a thread on the group's IO. I think I started for this meeting. If not, I'll start one. We can post links for playlists and other relevant information. Like I'll put up something about Radio Paradise, certainly, and we can share that information, and you all can play around with your own systems. It would be interesting one day, we should do this, to have a meeting that's focused. If somebody has a system like John or somebody else, they can play both Tidal and Qobuz and Spotify, that's willing, maybe has a subscription to all three, or maybe for 1 month they'll subscribe to all three, or they may have a 30-day free trial, and then play the same music if we can, and compare the streams. I have done that to some extent, where I have something that I ripped. I've compared CD in my Oppo player, CD that I ripped to my server, and the same music on Qobuz or some other source. And I still think, as a general rule, that my server is the best for whatever reason. Pretty close. The Oppo is pretty close, and it might be a difference in the DACs. I haven't compared it with using the same DAC, so that could account for a little bit of a difference. And sometimes streaming is good, but not great. And some of that also is probably compression, network congestion, jitter. Could also be that the volume. The one thing that all the streaming services do is they try to standardize the volume, so you're not going to have to adjust whatever you're listening through up and down based on the amplitude of that particular album or track. So they do some, I don't know what it's called,
Compression.
replay. Well, the sound not compression as much as they attenuate or boost it to keep the same volume. I know with even the Squeezebox device, they have something called track gain, album gain, and replay gain that basically equalizes it so the volume is roughly the same. And that could also account for differences, because we know that when you play something at different volume in your system, that can substantially impact your opinion of the quality. So that's another consideration. Tony, your hand is up.
Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Leveling or
So-
normalizing?
Yeah, it's called volume normalization.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to your point, though, Alan, with regard, I mean, I think most of us have done comparisons like that, and it goes back to what we were talking about with the frustration of the online content. Unless you're doing a comparison with a recording where there was only one and only ever one CD of that piece of music ever produced, you really don't know which version of the music you're listening to online. So there's that ambiguity as well, and it's so
Not apples to apples.
Right.
It's really not. Well,
Right.
you don't ever know for sure. I guess that's the problem.
Yeah,
I have a general question. I know that we've all been through DACs, and how many DACs we've owned and the differences we've heard from DAC to DAC. But I'd like to ask people that have had multiple streamers and ask them what are the discernible differences that they heard from streamer to streamer. Has anybody upgraded their streamer or got another streamer just because they felt that it would give them a better sound quality?
Well, can I say something here?
Sure.
Alan?
And then Tony.
Okay, so I was going to say, I think I mentioned some of this on the IO emails, but I think from a streamer, high quality streamers are worthwhile in the sense that if you consider the problems that you get from the internet, right? Like you mentioned, the ISP, the congestion, whatever's going on in the network that you don't control, not just your local network, but the external, before it gets to your house. You can't control that. And so the high-end streamers do a good job of making your system immune to that because they have buffering capabilities that can take all the content. These packets are arriving in random, order, whatever, but I can make it seem like it's coming to you, the DAC, as a fluid, consistent stream because I can buffer up, a number of seconds, if you will. You're lagging a little bit in time. You're not, as you pull, you're maybe a second or two behind time, but who cares? It's audio, not music, no video. But you basically can buffer things up internally, and then you can play it to the DAC in a consistent way. And a good streamer will do a better job of that. So I can tell the difference between my touch and my Auralic because the Auralic has a big time processor, a bunch of memory in it, and it can do that better, right? But the touch I love because it's so easy to use. And I have two of them, by the way. But the Auralic areas, and some of the like renders and the high end streamers can do a good job of sort of isolating the network problems and bringing it to your DAC in a nice way. So that's why I think it's worthwhile investing in a good streamer if you want to do away with the network problems from the external world that you can't control.
It's interesting, Leo. I think you posted it on the group's IO discussion, and I was curious how good the buffer is in the Squeezebox Touch by itself. So I disconnected. I was listening to it. This one I had wired, although I use that one wired to the internet, and I played music from my system, and I disconnected the Ethernet cable, and timed it. No, 8 seconds.
Each.
It went on for 8
It's
seconds.
Yes.
So that's actually pretty good buffer for a $300 device. That's got a fair bit of memory.
Right.
And I think that should be more than sufficient for aligning everything and then feeding everything to the DAC. And hopefully the DAC then has enough anti-jitter or timing chips built in to reorganize everything. And that's probably one we could really go down into the weeds about the timing and,
Yeah,
and
they're
having
different
a clock,
things.
a
Yeah.
clock.
Right. Yeah,
But I'm
before
impressed.
the streamer is one world, and from the streamer to your DAC is a different world. We can have separate conversations around that, but they're two different things. They really are.
Yeah, yeah.
Tony?
Tony, you had your hand up before.
Well, so, without going back, I mean, I still have 4 touches. And the,
You know what you can sell them for, by the way? You know what you can sell them for online?
well, right about now, they're going for about $100 a piece.
What?
But a couple of years ago, they were going for about $200 a piece.
I've seen it for 500 even still.
New
New in box.
Well, new
I have
in
one
box.
new in box. Yeah.
Well, new in box, that's a different story now. But so look, I've used the Slim devices for a lot of years, and they're great. And I even had a couple of them modified. Remember the Duet?
Yeah.
I had the Duet modified, and I I ran a linear power supply through it. But without getting into that, so recently I went from my Slim devices, I'll call them, to a Sonore Ultra Rendu, which is a very clever little streaming device. But you got to use a standalone separate front end for it. It doesn't have its own front end. And then I went from there to a Hollow Red, and then I went from there to I'm currently using a Hi-Fi Rose RS-130. So everything Leo said, all true. But what I've come to feel is an additional area of an improvement that you can get, and certainly with the Arenders and the Arlics and the Lumens. I was considering a Lumen U2, but is what I don't know what to call it. Joe and I have talked about this. And I believe it is effectively a reduction in noise that affects the digital circuitry, because ultimately it all gets passed to something that converts the digital to analog, like it or not. And all of these are small contributors to noise, not analog noise, but it's noise nonetheless. You got to remember, digital music is analog gated signals. They are analog gated signals riding on cables and through digital circuits. They're gated analog signals. It's what they are. And there is noise in all of these devices. And as you move through to the better devices that are better shielded, have better isolation at their inputs, have better ways of managing the reduction of noise at their outputs before they get passed on to the next device, and a digital to analog converter, if you don't already have one in your streamer. It's you can hear when the noise goes away. I mean, Joe has been at my house, and we've done these experiments. You can hear when it's like you don't know it's there until it's gone. And that's, apart from everything else that Leo said, is a surprising, at least to me, understanding of what happens as you move into, these devices that are built with regard to shielding and noise reduction the part of the reason why the touch maybe can be surpassed, and I believe it can, just the nature of the years that have gone by, is that it's not a very well shielded device. That thing spews noise like there's no tomorrow. Noise that you don't know is there until it's not there anymore.
When you say
So-
noise, it's not like you're going to hear a hissing or
No,
a hash.
no, absolutely not. It is
So
not that
what
kind.
differentiates? How do you just?
Well,
you know.
it's so all of a sudden there's a reduction in sort of like a potentially sort of what you might call a grayness, or this kind of like the isolation between the performers in a particular space sounds a little blacker. Like there's less stuff that seems to be clouding the identity of each component of the music you're hearing. I mean,
So it's more resolving. Is a more resolving presentation?
Resolving is kind of a crude word to use, I'd say, because it's not, you may actually ultimately wind up being able to pick out even the tiniest little bit of subtle detail that maybe you didn't quite grasp before, and it becomes a little bit easier to pick out. So, why that happens, I don't know, but and Joe knows this, I've referred to it as unheard noise. You never know you heard it before until you don't hear it anymore.
Interesting.
Noise.
Interesting perspective. You'll have to host, although you live way out there, but
I'll be happy. Look, you guys get in a van. I'll be happy to host again.
Tony, will it show up in an ears only, trust your ears test? Or does it magically disappear when you can't see it and know it?
So I'm fortunate. My first wife, when she was still alive, was my single blind listener. She had no idea what I was doing back in the day. And my current wife is my single blind listener. She has no idea what I'm doing. No idea. I don't tell her what I'm doing. I have no idea. She can't even see what I'm doing because my equipment is behind my, it's my seating area. And I'll say, which one do you like better? After we listen to pieces of music she likes. And this is back even, in the earlier days with my first wife. And I never tell them what I'm doing. And I never would, they weren't preloaded with any conceptions. And
Google the clever Hans effect when we're done with all
no,
of this.
No, I know all about the clever Hans effect. But the point is, without me telling them a word, they can describe in terms that mirror my own expectations what it is they believe the differences are, and they can tell that there's a difference.
And it's not volume differences.
No.
Will it show up in an ears only test? A trust your ears only test. Will it show up?
I don't know. I've only got me, Joe, and and my wife. We can only go by what our experience tells us.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. I could arrange one.
But it's meaningless without my system.
So only your system shows up this noise, nobody else's
No,
system? It's that kind of noise?
That's not what I'm saying.
Oh.
I'm surprised that audiophiles still argue about this. It is only a system that you have lived with and are living with day after day, year after year, decade after decade, that you understand with precise intimacy. That's the only system. Or I keep going back to Joe. In the case of Joe, because we have lived with each other's systems over the course of decades, where we know what these systems sound like. It's only when you have a tremendous intimacy with a system that it becomes potentially possible to understand what these differences are that you're hearing. You can't walk into somebody else's system that you've never heard before and say, oh, well, no, you didn't hear that now, did you? It's a meaningless experiment.
So the noise is something that you have to take years to learn and to hear.
You have to learn what your system sounds like.
You're basically looking for the deltas, right? The differences.
That's all.
Jake,
That's
right?
exactly
Because
it.
you know, familiarity, and I think we can all relate to that to some extent on many things, right? When you have familiarity with something, when something else happens in that system that you're familiar with that's different, you can pinpoint differences easier.
Mhm. But
Right?
that's what everybody says.
I think
that's what everybody says before a blind test, and then afterwards, the results say otherwise.
This is a completely off topic discussion.
Yeah.
But okay, but I've got to tell this story. When I was living in New Jersey and Joe was still living in New York, one of the things I did, and I didn't tell him, I spent 2 months doing this. I didn't say one word to him, not one word, and he's here to verify it. I spent 2 months listening to 4 different outlets. 4 different outlets. I created a hardwired box, 10 gauge hardwired connections, and I soldered all 4 outlets to them. And I spent 2 months listening to them. One piece of equipment, my preamp. That's it. One piece of equipment. And I wrote a whole like a whole diary of what I heard over time. And one day I said, Joe, can you come down for the day? And he said yes. And I said, I'm not going to tell you what we're going to do. And he came down. Now Joe's ears are better than mine. I mean, I think mine are pretty good. Joe's ears are better than mine. And I sat him down. My equipment was behind the couch. He had no idea what I was doing, other than the equipment would turn off momentarily, and then it would turn back on. His music, he knew my system. We had speakers from the same manufacturer. Long story short, I asked him to write down what all the differences were. And it was almost a dead match. And he preferred the same outlet I did for the same reasons. It was almost a dead match. Tell Joe, tell them I am not lying.
No, that did happen. That did. Absolutely.
So it's possible.
Mm.
And
I don't spend time listening to outlets, so I couldn't really judge, but that's fine. I was kind of sticking to the server thing. I think we were talking about the
point I'm making though, AJ, is to judge differences in very, very good systems. We've all got good systems. Mm-hmm. We all like our systems, and we all know our systems intimately. And there's a point at which you can only judge a certain degree of difference effectively in your own system.
Okay.
I agree with that because as you all know, I love the Livingston Taylor, Isn't She Lovely, whistling and all. And I'm used to that, having heard it live and having heard it in my system. And that's what I use as a reference. But I always go back to how I can notice little nuances in my system more so than I can elsewhere, just because I know, and it's the room acoustics, there's a lot of stuff, but it's interesting. I understand where you're coming from, Tony. Okay, Sam, and then Gary.
I'm going to throw a question out to the group, germane to this whole issue of noise, particularly what Tony was talking about. And a little bit different question is, I've read a lot about people who are advocating the last link to your DAC as far as connection should be an optical cable, not necessarily Ethernet. And that will reduce the noise that Tony's talking about. Anybody have any experience with that and can share their feelings on that?
Tony, you're muted.
So I don't know that there's a definitive answer to that. I have the ability to run either. So the Hi-Fi Rose RS-130 has an SFP port on it, a small form pluggable port. You can either plug a hardwired Ethernet module into it, or you can plug a fiber optic module into it. My Cisco 2960 switch that I use has an SFP port on it, and it also has regular Ethernet ports on it. I don't know that there's a definitive answer to this, at least insofar as my own experience tells me. What my experience tells me is they're different, and it becomes a preference. To me, it's at a level of difference that it almost becomes a preference. That's my experience so far. I've done it, and I've got like a stack of fiber optic modules. I've got Finisars, I've got Ciscos, I've got Avagos, I've got Broadcoms. I got a whole stack of them. I've tried them. I've tried almost all of them. Guess what? They all sound a little different. Doesn't mean one's better than the other. It becomes it's almost a personal choice at that point. So I don't know that anyone has proven that
but
going optical is better.
Can I chime in, Alan?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of
forgive me, I'm gonna have to go. No, I'm not. I have to get up for work tomorrow. So thank you guys.
Thanks for input, AJ.
Thanks, AJ.
All right, bye now.
So when you
Follow
say
up with Tony, AJ. Maybe we can set up another comparison.
So we're talking about the network connection, right? And that where it goes into your DAC, assuming your DAC takes an internet connection, which some DACs do, some don't. But sometimes you have a streamer that takes the internet connection, then you go from the streamer to the DAC. So that's a different scenario. But here we are talking about the the network connection, right? Whether it's to a streamer to the DAC, and should that network connection be fiber or not? And well, what you're looking to do there is you're trying to isolate noise created within the local network, right? Stuff you may be injecting from power supplies or network, your switches, your routers, and everything. They do generate noise, right? So by using a fiber connection into the streamer or DAC, you're isolating that noise out. You're basically not allowing it to move forward. So that's one nice way to do that. The other way is to use Wi-Fi, right? And some streamers or DACs, I don't know if many DACs support Wi-Fi, but I know streamers do support Wi-Fi. If you have a decent, right, fail-proof Wi-Fi switch, and you have a good spot, a good signal, then why not use Wi-Fi? So either Wi-Fi or fiber can serve that purpose, right?
Yeah, that's
well,
a good
if I can interject, because you still could be injecting noise. The streamer itself could get a pristine signal and still inject
the streamer
noise.
itself, but that's going to be independent of the. I'm talking about how to get rid of that noise on the front end. That's the stuff that's coming into the streamer, not what the streamer itself may do. That's a different conversation. I'm just saying the noise before the streamer or DAC. How do you guard against it, right? And one way to do it is fiber. Another way is Wi-Fi.
Right, and that's an excellent point. And let me step back because that's an excellent point, because what I didn't mention, I guess Sam, you were asking that. What I didn't mention when I provided my last response was that I already have my home router. The first thing I did, my home router is optically isolated from the rest of my network. So I already have optical isolation, at least from whatever junk might be carried into my home router. So I've already got optical isolation there. And then I've got optical isolation between that and my audio switch. So the optical isolation I'm playing with at my streamer is a third layer of optical isolation. It's like a third stage of optical isolation. And at that point, to me, it's not really clear whether or not, it's a slam dunk. I've proven that, I've actually gotten rid of noise. it's too subtle at that point.
Let me, before we get to Gary, I'm curious if there are any DACs that either market or have proof in their design that they can eliminate noise at that more or less being the end point. If they get a noisy signal of whatever sort, do they have any isolation built in that would eliminate it at the end point like that? Yes, Tony.
So you're asking a general question, so I'll respond in this way. The PS Audio Direct Stream Mark II, which is what I use, they for their copper inputs, AES, I2S, even USB, RCA, all of those are what they call are galvanically isolated. They are essentially, they are electrically isolated between the port and where they hit the circuit board. So yes, there are DACs that do that. I don't know of a network capable DAC that does that. You know, maybe a
Streamers do.
Yeah, which one?
Streamers do. Typically,
no, but we're talking DACs.
Yeah,
though.
DACs is a different story, but streamers usually have a galvanic. The high-end ones do.
Yep.
Okay, interesting. Okay, Gary, and then Juan.
Well, mine is more of a kindergarten question. I don't understand all these DACs that everybody is using. Almost every component that I have connects with HDMI. Where in the world would I put a DAC somewhere? And when you do that, you end up with analog out because it's a DA converter, right? Where does the analog signal go into your system?
Well, I'll start off by saying you do have a DAC. You use a receiver, and your receiver has DAC chips. They're just all in one box.
Why would I need another one?
Well, you wouldn't unless you can get a higher quality one that's a separate device. That's the whole point. If you go up the chain of high-end audio with separates, if you believe that makes a difference, you could theoretically get a higher quality DAC that's isolated from all the other stuff going on in your receiver, that has the newest technology in terms of the DAC chip, or a R2R, the design, the topography of the digital analog conversion. And yes, it would have an analog out that you would then feed into your receiver as an analog input, RCA or otherwise, or in our case, we oftentimes just feed it to our preamp.
I'm going to buy an external DAC for higher quality sound and then feed it with an RCA cable?
No, what he means by RCA is you feed it into a preamp or a receiver, just like you feed any analog signal, whether it's a tape deck. Okay, phono is a different voltage, but you just put it in as a regular line stage input into your preamp or your receiver. So that's what you would use a DAC for.
DAC has a line out. It has a line out signal.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think Gary's point, to refine it a little bit, at the beginning of this whole thing, this whole digital thing, audiophiles or the industry decided, well, you just can't have a player, because I mean, me and Tony have been putting capacitors at the end of players, of Magnavox players, ever since we started this whole fiasco. And it seemed like the biggest, the value of a capacitor you could put on there as output capacitors, the better the thing sounded, because we all knew that digital was perfect. So what must have really been wrong was the analog signal on the output side of our DAC. So we all put little boxes there, or we tried to fit these big capacitors in these little spaces, and we did all that. And then the industry or us decided, no, this is all wrong. You got to have a transport which is separate to a DAC. So now we took one piece of equipment and we made it two pieces of equipment, okay? So now you say, okay, now I have to get a better DAC. And the reason I'm going to be separates is because I'm going to get a transport that sounds better than the built-in transport, and I'm going to get a DAC that sounds better than the built-in DAC, okay? Now we're doing the reverse. We're going into streamers that have these DACs built in, and the streamers are the same price, whether or not they have a DAC built in or not. So I think the question Gary's, proposing here, or if I can refine it in my own translation, is that what are we sacrificing now? We're putting DACs back into streamers, or I know what we're sacrificing by putting integrated amplifiers back into streamers. I mean, that's a given. That's like we're back into the old receiver days. But what are we sacrificing now, whether we buy a streamer that has a DAC built in or doesn't have a DAC built in? I mean, some people would say we're not sacrificing anything, but from an audiophile point of view, look where we're going. Look what we tried to refine, and now we're unrefining.
Okay, if I may respectfully interject here a second, I think, I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but I think what Gary is planting the seed of a future Zoom meeting on DACs. Because I think that's a whole hour and a half, 2-hour conversation. And by the way, a footnote, the Central Florida Audio Society has a pending meeting with Giuselli Labs out in Melbourne, Florida. I know that's very far for you guys, but we have a pending meet out there. They've invited us over for a factory tour to listen to their equipment. I don't know if any of you guys know the Giuselli Labs. It's a mom pop, grandpop shop. They make these beautiful DACs with wood enclosures or metal enclosures, and they get very good reviews. They've been in all the audio shows, but yeah, I'm proposing that another Zoom meeting talking about DACs would be in order. I'm for one would love to get more information on DACs myself, and I think obviously Gary planted the seed, so I'm just going to throw that out there. And
yeah, definitely.
And the reason I raised my hand, I want to thank everybody for all the information. I got to bail because I got to put on my diaper and get to bed because tomorrow's a working day. But thank you guys for all the information. And I hope we do that again. Really, especially thankful for the Space Coast Audiophile Society out there for welcoming us to your meetings.
So long,
Thanks, Juan.
Thank you. Good to see you, Juan.
Thanks. Glad you could make it. All right. I'll bring up something interesting. A lot of when we look at consumer price entry stuff, most of the receivers for the most part, versus the higher end stuff, like what differentiates them, the mass market items, obviously they're still building to a price point. Now, a couple years ago bought the new Anthem. I needed a new receiver, and I got the Anthem MRX 740, which was the second from the top of the line. And they advertised that they were using the AKM chipset for their DAC, the DAC chip that was built in there. And some people felt AKM was better than the ESS, which is the other main competitor. There's also Texas Instruments, Burr Brown, other devices. Anyway, so they went with the AKM. I forget what number it was. And then AKM had that horrible fire. The factory burned down, and they couldn't produce the chips anymore. And Anthem was in a bind. They had just released this product. Apparently, they hadn't stockpiled enough. And what did they do? They re-engineered it and started offering them then with the ESS chipset. They didn't say anything about whether it was a downgrade or whatnot. But what I read is they did not use the highest, like the 9038 chipset from ESS, which was the top of the line, but they used the 9028, again, hitting a certain price point. So manufacturers, certainly at the consumer level, and maybe even in the high-end space, may choose the DAC chip or the type, the top topology of what they do based on price. And at what point are we basically, when you go up and up and up, higher and higher at the price point, you're splitting hairs in terms of any improvement. It may sound different, but is it really worth the extra money? There's no way to tease out the answer to that, but there certainly is a difference. And although we'll save the discussion for another time, I think having a meeting about DACs is wonderful. We actually had a shoot up many years ago of like 4 or 5 DACs for an in-person meeting that we held. But the other thing is the analog output stage of a DAC is so critical. So it's hard to say what's going on with the digital side, the chipset, because you also have to have the analog output stage, and that can vary. Very complicated, a bag of worms.
It may not even be a chipset, right? There may be many different ways to skin that cat.
Yeah, an FG and what the field gate, field programmable gated something or other. I forget
Gate
what
array,
that is.
FPGAs.
Yeah, and then
FPGAs,
also R2R. Right.
And now we got all these digital units now that are coming with switching power supplies. So first of all, the build to a price point, Alan, is the case no matter what you buy. Even if you buy a $30,000 DAC, it's still built to a price point. Everything is built to a price point. But now you see these digital components coming out, and where do they chintz out? They chintz out on the power supply. They give you a switching power supply. Now, I'm not saying switching power supplies can't be refined and can't be better than what they were. I eliminated all switching power supplies from my system because they were making noise that I heard. I mean, there wasn't a big choice here. They were making noise, and I got rid of them. But I'm seeing that as a trend now. So here we are going higher and higher in all these isolation devices and all this design and all this circuit design, and they give you a $25 switching power supply with it. So, where does it come to the point where it's a money grab, as you would say, and when does it become a real sound?
It's always a money grab.
Well,
Yeah, you know that.
So what happens in the future? I mean, is high-end audio a dying niche, basically, as we are getting older as dinosaurs, and everything is going to revert back more to mainstream consumer-oriented, all-in-one boxes?
I think the music nowadays is going to drive it that way. The music nowadays is just not good. You might as well just listen to it on headphones. I mean, some of it. I'm not saying all of it, but generally speaking, people are used to listening to headphones. So unless we can have our show, and we were trying to attract as many young people as we can, but still, it's limited because they use the headphones. They're on the go all the time. It's just a different lifestyle. So.
I mean, I'm seeing things go into like lifestyle products, where you're spending a lot of money because it has a real fancy faceplate, and it has a lot of switches and bells and whistles, which is something that sort of goes against our grain because, we argued we didn't even want a tone control on the thing because that screwed up everything. We wanted discrete pots. We want, and now all of a sudden I see stuff in there that's like a lifestyle product, and they're not cheap. So I think in some respects, Alan, you're right, that the market is going in a different direction than catering to us.
But then on the other hand of that, then you have people that are vinyl is taking a surge. I mean, there's a lot of vinyl being sold today, and people are buying it and they're playing records. My daughter plays records, and she's, so it seems like there's both. I think there's old school and new school going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think
it used to be, yeah.
I think a lot of vinyl research is just. I mean, some of it's the kids like the sound, and some of it the young folks just like the physical media, which is a big attraction to records.
I think a good question to ask Mike Bovera is what's the age of his average customer, and it's not young. I mean, it just isn't.
So I don't know if you guys saw this, but with regard to your question, Alan, JBL, you could find it on YouTube. JBL just released a video, like a commercial, a marketing campaign that is it to some degree, I think it's almost a little bit of a parody, but it introduces, to Joe's point, the new JBL approach in marketing toward young people, and this commercial, I'll call it, it's online, so it's a commercial. It's three women, and one of them is talking to her two friends, knowingly about JBL's new system approach and how it fits into like it's funny. It starts out as kind of like none of them know what they're talking about, and then the main speaker, this slightly older woman, starts getting like very market language oriented with the JBL products, and it's an attempt to interest young people in a system approach to music in a home. You have to search it out. I mean, it's I don't know if it's meant to be funny, but in a way, it's just kind of funny because of how they gear it toward the way young people they think about this stuff. So it's JBL. Let me see if I can get the title. Hang on. It's called JBL Goes Modern with New Affordable, something or other. It's really quite fascinating. So somebody is trying. Whether or not it's going to work is an interesting story, or an interesting question, I should say.
Yeah, and then you see, people raving about their USB connected turntables that, whatever the cheap crap, what's it called? That brand? I forget what it is. I forget. They're all made in China. Crossley, like Crossley.
Yeah, the Crossley
My
tables.
niece and nephew. This is funny. Quick, brief story. Probably about 3 years ago, my niece and nephew had been visiting, and they love my system. They heard, they go, "Wow, I gotta build a stereo system." And they both live out of town. And first, my niece emails me and says, "Well, tell me what to buy. I want to get started, and I want to play records." I don't have, in fact, I didn't play vinyl for them. I played all digital, but their friends are playing records. They want to have records. I said, "Okay, well, what's your budget?" She goes, "Oh, I have a big budget." I go, "Okay, how much is it?" "Oh, about $750. I said, "For what?" She goes, "For the whole thing." I go, "You want to build a stereo system for $750? And I've put together something. We're using the Fluence and I think a U-turn turntable, or I think it was a Fluence turntable and active speakers. They had a package deal that was around that. And I said, "Here, this is pretty good for the money. I mean, it's not great, but it's a good start for you. And it's all in one, is perfect." And I didn't hear back, and I waited, and I reached out to her 3 months later. I said, "Well, what'd you end up doing?" She goes, "Oh, I got a much better deal. I bought this thing off Amazon. It's a Crossley. Ever hear of Crossley? It's a Crossley system, and it has USB, and I can stream from my phone through it. It's phenomenal." I go, "Well, enjoy." And then my nephew, her brother, got the same thing because she raved about it. He said, "Well, I'm just going to get that then for whatever, $300-400. Yeah, that's the direction they're going in. I don't know.
I
You
think
remember all those all-in-one systems we used to buy? It had a turntable built in.
Oh yeah.
And they were called components. After our fathers had the big Magnavoxes and the Zeniths and the big pieces of equipment, then we went to so-called modular, where we had a receiver with the turntable on the top and two separate speakers. And, we thought that was great back then. I mean, that was the state of the art back then,
Yeah. I'm curious, for those of you that have children, how many of you would say your children listen seriously to audio? Doesn't have to be a high-end system, but sitting down and listening. Lenny, you said your son?
My daughter is
Mark,
42 years old, and I brought her the best systems I could afford at the time. And I brought her up from 5 years old. She had a nice system with a separate cassette deck, all separates. She doesn't listen to any of them. She listens to radio through her TV, and she listens to music through her TV.
There's going to be a segment of the young folks who are interested in if you get them exposed to it, interested in a better sound. And I think it's incumbent upon retailers, especially the ones who are in urban centers where there are a lot of young people, to get them involved. And for example, last community I lived in North Carolina, there was a very nice downtown retailer, and he held once a month something called Vinyl Night, where people would come and bring their records and play them for each other, and we listen to each other's music, which is fun. We all do as well. But he was gearing it toward the young folks, but he would play it on a better system. And a lot of these kids became involved in that. So I think that's one way that maybe, if we can impress upon our retailer associates to get the kids involved.
There's hardly any retailers left.
They have ears too, these kids. But yeah, it's also
bring them to our show. I mean, that's fun. They go to the hotel, they go by the pool, then they come listen a little bit.
Yeah, that's the best.
I don't know
That's
if this is the right night to talk about it, but I just think the whole industry that that we're in, that we're involved in, I would say, it makes it hard, right? Because you go to an audio show and you walk into this room and you see the Sakura speaker, whatever, and how much is that? Oh, that's 150, whatever. It's like, oh my God, that's a mortgage, that's a home. I mean, who can afford that? It's just outrageous. So to listen to a good system, you don't have to do that. So I think we are our worst enemies, honestly, because we do these things and we make it impossible for most people to get into. I mean, that's
Well, I
really
mean,
reality.
in our show, we have some really good sounding lower price systems that I'd be afraid to put those lower price systems next to some of these bigger rooms. I really would, because man,
But
So
maybe we should
of
have.
course, people want to see the $1 million room. That's okay. They go look at it. They see what's
Yeah.
in it. But then they're upstairs and listen to little systems, and they're kind of picking their own budget. Hopefully,
You need to make a focus. I hope you guys are to have a certain, at least 10%, ideally, of the rooms offering, even if they have dual systems, to at least offer something at an attainable price point for the young generation. That should be
we're
a
definitely
priority
trying
for
to
the
do
show.
that. Definitely trying to do that. Yep.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Yeah.
It's not even for the younger generation, because I understand. I'll walk into a room and I'll say, "How much are those?" Thinking that the speakers, all right, they might be 10,000, they might be 20,000, they're $80,000. My wife's. I listened to the Martins at the show, and I said to my wife, "I'd love to buy those Martins." She said, "You know what, Joe? You're 71 years old. Just take the money out of the bank. Just buy them, will you?
Oh, really?
Get it off your chest and just buy them." I said, "Hun, the Martins were $82,000. And she said, "Well, maybe you shouldn't just go buy them." Because the prices,
She's
we
understanding to a point.
but they're still like sky high. They're unreachable.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah,
Well, anything
maybe we
else?
should.
I think.
I was going
I'm
to
sorry,
say
go
that
ahead.
maybe we should challenge the industry and say, look, you guys, you cannot build anything that's worth more than 100,000 or something like that. If we cap it, I'm just saying, if you cap it, maybe more people will come into it instead of getting the money from the few that are billionaires or millionaires. Maybe you get it from the bigger masses. You attract more people into it. It, the more you sell, the more money you make. If you make it cheaper, but don't build $500,000 speakers. Who in the world can have those? Only a handful of people in the world can have them.
It has to be a national business. Mike Bovero's national. There's no way you can have a stereo shop local and sell for as much as he sells for. It's got to be national. And I mean, he has some people that don't even listen to the system. They just order it. They've never heard the speaker and they just order it. It's just it's absolutely amazing to me.
Well, that's just that basically just I don't know. They're just trying to show off. I'm going to end the recording. We can continue the conversation, but thanks everybody. Stay put. I'm just going to end the recording since we're veering off here, but we'll follow up with a DAC meeting soon, and we'll work on that. Thanks everybody for attending. Let me end the recording. Thanks everybody.